Developing right now on Morning News Now, a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas now in its 5th day after a deal to extend a ceasefire in Gaza.
We would, of course, hope to see the pause extended further, and that will depend upon Hamas continuing to release hostages.
The new hope for families still waiting to reunite with their loved ones. And here at home, the suspect accused of shooting 3 Palestinian American students in Vermont faces a judge for the first time. We have team coverage. Also this morning, the weather outside is frightful in parts of the East Coast and the Great Lakes as an early winter storm makes its way across several states. We're tracking the conditions and what to expect for tomorrow's big Rockefeller tree lighting just outside our doors. Plus, an unexpected side effect of the COVID pandemic, new research revealing a link between strict COVID restrictions and mental health. And 'tis the season for giving. Black Friday and Cyber Monday are in the books. Now it is time for Giving Tuesday. We're looking at some of the places you can donate for a good cause.
Bought all the gifts we're going to give. Now we can give to charities and other
Still got to do those as well, though.
Yeah. That too. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started today in the Middle East, where a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas has been extended for another 48 hours, going into effect this morning.
The extension was agreed to yesterday after another 11 Israeli hostages were released. This Hamas video shows the captives being handed over to the International Red Cross before they were transported out of Gaza. Now, as part of the agreement, Israel also released 33 Palestinian women and children held in Israeli prisons. This video shows the moment 2 Palestinians were reunited with family members in Jerusalem. This ceasefire extension will lead to the release of more hostages. It will also allow for more aid to get into Gaza. But the UN Secretary General has warned that the life-saving supplies are not enough to cope with the humanitarian disaster unfolding there.
It's a glimpse of hope and humanity in the middle of the darkness of war. And I strongly hope that this will enable us to increase even more the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza that is suffering so much, knowing that even with that additional amount of time, it will be impossible to satisfy all the dramatic needs of the population in Gaza.
We got a lot to cover. NBC's Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv, and Aaron Gilchrist is in Washington. Good morning to both of you. Raf, let's start with you. Walk us through the terms of this truce extension and where we stand with today's hostage prisoner swap.
Well, Joe, good morning. It is 2 p.m. here in Israel and in Gaza, and we are expecting in around 2 hours' time the first of those hostages to start to be released inside of Gaza. It is by now a familiar choreography. Hamas gunmen handing those hostages over to the Red Cross, filming that handover for their own propaganda purposes, and then the hostages either going south to Egypt or directly over the Israeli border and back to Israel's military. Now, the terms of this extension were agreed in advance. It would be 10 additional hostages for each additional day of ceasefire. This is a 2-day extension, so we're expecting over the next 2 days to see 20 hostages coming out of Gaza in exchange for 60 Palestinians released from prisons in East Jerusalem and in the occupied West Bank. We believe, according to the Prime Minister's office, that there are around 173 hostages still in Gaza right now. 20 more come out. That gets you down to around 150. The terms of this deal are still for women and children. Beyond this 20, there are more women and children who could be released under these same conditions. But the women and kids are kind of the low-hanging fruit from a negotiation point of view. And these talks will only get more complicated as we start to get into the male prisoners, and most complicated as we get to the Israeli soldiers who are being held captive. But the hope for now in Israel, in the U.S., is to see at least 20 more hostages coming out over the next 2 days. And we'll see if a further extension is possible after that. Joe.
Aaron, let's bring you in here so we understand. We heard a moment ago from the Biden administration saying they'd like to see this deal extended even further, right? What has been the reaction from the White House and any indication that that could happen, that they're working on that?
It is something that they're working on already, Savannah, and Raf laid out sort of the complications involved here. The administration has said that it is grateful for the 2-day extension that we're seeing now, and that its teams, along with the other negotiators in the Middle East, are working on ways to figure out how to extend the truce even further. Obviously, as Raf noted, we've seen women and children coming out. There are more who can come out, particularly over these next 2 days. But there will be a point where the focus of the negotiations around hostage releases and around extension of the truce would focus on the men that are being held by Hamas and other groups inside Gaza. I want you to hear a little bit of what the National Security Council spokesperson said about this idea, first about the extension that we're seeing now and about extending the truce even further.
Of course, we welcome the announcement. This humanitarian pause has already brought a halt to the fighting, together with a surge of humanitarian assistance. We'd certainly like to see even that extension extended further until all the hostages are released. That's really the goal here, get all the hostages home with their families where they belong.
And again, as you said, until all of the hostages are released, that is the goal the United States has set. The president has said that his team and he will focus significantly on that particular point, even as Israel indicates it intends to resume its war effort.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Raf. Looking ahead, I mean, Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, they've said several times they're committed to resuming the war after the truce ends. So with that in mind, we know humanitarian groups, they've been rushing to get as much aid as possible into Gaza. Talk to us about what the situation is like there right now and the feeling among those in Gaza about the war starting up again.
I think the feeling is dread, Jim. Palestinians inside Gaza have had these 4 days of relative quiet, without airstrikes all around them, without Israeli jets and drones overhead for the first time in 7 weeks. But they have used this time to count their losses. People have tried to go back to their homes to see if their homes are still standing. They've tried to contact their relatives to find out who's alive, who's dead. The death toll inside Gaza, more than 15,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Proportional for population, guys. That is the equivalent of more than 2 million Americans being killed over the last 7 weeks. We have seen humanitarian aid coming in the form of around 200 trucks every day over the course of the ceasefire. That is welcome. It is also, as you heard from the Secretary General of the United Nations, just a fraction of what Gaza needs. So people have been painfully aware that this ceasefire was temporary, and we have seen Prime Minister Netanyahu literally inside Gaza saying that the war will continue on the other side of it. Guys.
Aaron, quickly before we let you both go, we know Secretary Blinken is expected to return to the region this week. This is on another diplomatic mission, and it also looks like the first round specifically of U.S. aid to Gaza will be arriving soon. Tell us about that.
We did learn from a senior administration official last night that there are 3 U.S. military-facilitated flights of humanitarian aid that will go into Egypt. The first one expected to land today. That material will be offloaded into United Nations vehicles and then taken into Gaza. This will be food, water, medicine, and importantly, winter gear, as winter is coming in Gaza. And so they want to help folks be able to be prepared for that. And as you noted, Secretary Blinken is headed back to Tel Aviv and to the West Bank, again, to talk about increasing humanitarian aid, about how to better protect civilians as Israel is engaged in its ground operations as well. And also about, the State Department noted he will talk about the 2-state solution, the idea that eventually this will need to lead to a Palestinian state living next to an Israeli state. Savannah, Joe.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much. We're going to let you go. Raf, stay with us a moment longer. We know you've been speaking with some Israeli hostages about their time in captivity. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the big questions over the last 7 weeks has been what kind of conditions are these hostages being held in inside of Gaza? Are they being abused? Are they getting food? Are they getting medicine? Can they see the sun? Are they being held in tunnels? And we're starting to get answers to some of those questions as these released hostages tell their families, and we speak to those family members. I want you to take a listen to a little bit of what we've been hearing.
Amid tearful scenes of hostages reuniting with their families, we're learning new details about their time in captivity and the conditions that around 170 remaining hostages are enduring still. 9-year-old Ohad Munder Zakri was released Friday with his mother Karen and grandmother Ruth. They spent 49 days in Gaza as prisoners of Hamas.
They were with one guy who kept them all the time, and she told me that all the time he did like that. So they were scared. They were whispering.
Were they ever tortured by Hamas?
No, I don't think so.
The family says they never saw other hostages and were moved constantly, sometimes held in tunnels like this, other times in houses or apartments.
They didn't get a lot of food. To go to the bathroom, they had to knock on the door, and then 1.5 hours waiting or 2 hours.
Cut off from the world, they had no idea about the scale of the October 7th attack or the global effort to bring them home.
She told me, I was on the television? Are you serious? I told her, your picture is all over the world.
They also didn't know Ohad's grandfather was alive, but remains a hostage, and found out they were being freed just hours before it happened. 25-year-old Roni Krivoy escaped and was on the run inside Gaza for 4 days before he was recaptured, his family says. Until now, most of what we knew came from Yocheved Lifshitz, one of the first hostages freed more than a month ago.
There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
The hostages may have valuable intelligence for Israel's military, but experts say the hostages need time to adjust.
They come out extremely anxious, suspicious, passive. They were passive for a long time. So there is a lot of work to be done in order to give them their sense of agency back.
Israel's government issuing guidelines for dealing with released children, saying expect age-inappropriate behavior like bedwetting, limit the number of visitors to keep them from being overwhelmed, and offer reassurance that they're safe now. Doctors say most of the children are in good health, and Ohad is now back home. But he has a long journey ahead just to be a kid again.
Now, the kids, thankfully, seem to be in good condition, but there is one older former hostage who is in serious medical condition right now. 84-year-old great-grandmother Elma Avraham was rushed straight to the ICU after she was released from Gaza on Sunday night. Hospital staff say she's on a ventilator and she's fighting for her life. Guys.
All right, Raph, as always, thank you for your thoughtful and compassionate reporting. Appreciate it. On the other side of the exchange, Palestinian women, even teenagers, are waking up at home this morning. Some were convicted of serious crimes, but others were held in administrative detention, not formally charged with anything. NBC's David Noriega spoke to the father of one of those teens who's now back home.
Jubilation in the West Bank as Palestinian women and children are freed from military jails, part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas.
That is a red car carrying the prisoners in question.
Among them, 17-year-old Iyas Khatib. His father Abed was there to greet him.
My son, he was just studying. He's in the high school. Till now, I'm telling you, I don't know why my son is in jail.
Israel calls these prisoners terrorists. Of those slated for release, some were convicted in Israeli military courts of violent crimes, including attempted murder. Others stand accused of offenses like throwing incendiary devices, throwing stones, or trespassing. But most have not been convicted, and many are teenagers held under what's known as administrative detention. That includes Iyas, with no formal charges or evidence presented against them. In February, IDF soldiers raided his home in the middle of the night, leaving behind a broken door and a family wondering when or if he would be back. Palestinian and international human rights groups say the system of military arrests and detentions lacks basic due process, especially when it comes to children.
Without charges, without trial, without anything, I can't defend myself, for instance, if I have no evidence, if I have no accusation specific.
And this happens regularly to children, to minors.
Yeah.
According to Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Israel had more than 1,300 people in administrative detention, including 23 children, before October 7th. And Palestinian groups say the number has skyrocketed since then. Palestinians in the occupied territories say these indefinite detentions without trial or evidence are just one of many ways the Israeli military occupation robs them of their basic human rights and dignity. Israeli authorities defend the practice, telling us in a statement that all prisoners are detained according to the provisions of the law. Before their release, they were told if they celebrated publicly or spoke to the press, they would face a fine of more than $18,000. We met Iyas Khatib the day after he came home. Are you willing to talk to me about your arrest and detention. He refused to talk, afraid Israeli soldiers would retaliate.
Our thanks to David Noriega for that report. Even before October 7th, the number of people held in administrative detention in reportedly deteriorating prison conditions had reached record highs. Even as people are being released as part of the ceasefire agreement, more are being arrested.
Well, President Biden has condemned the shooting of 3 Palestinian students in Vermont over the weekend, saying there is no place for hate in America. The suspect accused of carrying out the attack, which injured all 3 men, was arraigned yesterday. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
48-year-old Jason Eaton pleaded not guilty to attempted murder, accused of shooting 3 U.S. college students, all Palestinians, in Burlington, Vermont, visiting family for Thanksgiving.
This horrific, unprovoked attack was a tragic violation of the values and character of this welcoming, inclusive community.
The family says Tahsin Ali Ahmed, Hisham Awartani, and Kenan Abdelhamid were out for a walk, chatting in Arabic and English. 2 of them were wearing keffiyehs, traditional Arab scarves. According to the affidavit, Abdelhamid told police a man in a hoodie walked toward them and pulled out a pistol and started firing without saying a word. All 3 were shot.
They're all stable, but Hisham the prognosis is that it's very likely that he won't be able to walk again.
Hisham's parents spoke with NBC News' Aaron McLaughlin at their home in the West Bank city of Ramallah.
It was a vicious crime, and it will change my son's life.
Forever.
Forever. There's no reason that he should have been targeted in this way, because it was a targeted crime, without a doubt.
Authorities have not charged Eaton with a hate crime, but police say they are still investigating.
I do want to be clear that there is no question this was a hateful act.
It comes during a nationwide spike in both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic incidents.
All of us have also seen a sharp increase in the volume and frequency of threats against Jewish, Muslim, and Arab communities across our countries.
The war overseas fueling protests and hate nationwide.
We need to preach that all hate against Jews, against Muslims, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, these are ills in our country and they undermine our democratic values.
Do you think that is a message we're hearing from leaders in this country?
There's some lip service being paid to this, Stephanie, but it's not backed by really sincere efforts.
Palestinian American Amani Jamal is the Dean of International Affairs at Princeton. She went to the same high school in the West Bank as the 3 young men.
These students are me 30 years ago. And our dream was to come to the United States to get an education so that we could live a life of dignity and freedom.
Hisham Awartani's father wanted him to stay in the U.S. for the holidays because he thought it would be safer than Ramallah.
Who would think that such a thing would happen in one of the most liberal, diverse places in the world?
He hopes his son will be able to walk again.
We believe in our kid's strength, and we are certain that he's going to stand up on his feet again.
We're learning more about the shooter. We learned that he was let go from his job earlier this month. Also, authorities say they found multiple weapons in his home, including 3 shotguns and the pistol that was allegedly used in the shooting. According to the affidavit, when police arrived at his home for the search, he said to them, "I've been waiting for you." Back to you.
Thank you so much. Today in the Middle East, where a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas has been extended for another 48 hours, going into effect this morning.
The extension was agreed to yesterday after another 11 Israeli hostages were released. This Hamas video shows the captives being handed over to the International Red Cross before they were transported out of Gaza. Now, as part of the agreement, Israel also released 33 Palestinian women and children held in Israeli prisons. This video shows the moment 2 Palestinians were reunited with family members in Jerusalem. This ceasefire extension will lead to the release of more hostages. It will also allow for more aid to get into Gaza. But the UN Secretary General has warned that the life-saving supplies are not enough to cope with the humanitarian disaster unfolding there.
It's a glimpse of hope and humanity in the middle of the darkness of war. And I strongly hope that this will enable us to increase even more the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza that is suffering so much, knowing that even with that additional amount of time, it will be impossible to satisfy all the dramatic needs of the population in Gaza.
We got a lot to cover. NBC's Raph Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv, and Aaron Gilchrist is in Washington. Good morning to both of you. Raph, let's start with you. Walk us through the terms of this truce extension and where we stand with today's hostage prisoner swap.
Well, Joe, good morning. It is 2 p.m. here in Israel and in Gaza, and we are expecting in around 2 hours' time the first of those hostages to start to be released inside of Gaza. It is by now a familiar choreography. Hamas gunmen handing those hostages over to the Red Cross, filming that handover for their own propaganda purposes, and then the hostages either going south to Egypt or directly over the Israeli border and back to Israel's military. Now, the terms of this extension were agreed in advance. It would be 10 additional hostages for each additional day of ceasefire. This is a 2-day extension, so we're expecting over the next 2 days to see 20 hostages coming out of Gaza in exchange for 60 Palestinians released from prisons in East Jerusalem and in the occupied West Bank. We believe, according to the Prime Minister's office, that there are around 173 hostages still in Gaza right now. 20 more come out. That gets you down to around 150. The terms of this deal are still for women and children. Beyond this 20, there are more women and children who could be released under these same conditions. But the women and kids are kind of the low-hanging fruit from a negotiation point of view. And these talks will only get more complicated as we start to get into the male prisoners, and most complicated as we get to the Israeli soldiers who are being held captive. But the hope for now in Israel, in the U.S., is to see at least 20 more hostages coming out over the next 2 days. And we'll see if a further extension is possible after that. Joe.
Aaron, let's bring you in here so we understand. We heard a moment ago from the Biden administration saying they'd like to see this deal extended even further, right? What has been the reaction from the White House and any indication that that could happen, that they're working on that?
It is something that they're working on already, Savannah, and Raph laid out sort of the complications involved here. The administration has said that it is grateful for the 2-day extension that we're seeing now, and that its teams, along with the other negotiators in the Middle East, are working on ways to figure out how to extend the truce even further. Obviously, as Raph noted, we have seen women and children coming out. There are more who can come out, particularly over these next 2 days. But there will be a point where the focus of the negotiations around hostage releases and around extension of the truce would focus on the men that are being held by Hamas and other groups inside Gaza. I want you to hear a little bit of what the National Security Council spokesperson said about this idea, first about the extension that we're seeing now and about extending the truce even further.
Of course, we welcome the announcement. This humanitarian pause has already brought a halt to the fighting, together with a surge of humanitarian assistance. We'd certainly like to see even that extension extended further until all the hostages are released. That's really the goal here, get all the hostages home with their families where they belong.
And again, as you said, until all of the hostages are released, that is the goal the United States has set. The president has said that his team and he will focus significantly on that particular point, even as Israel indicates it intends to resume its war effort.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Raph. Looking ahead, I mean, Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, they've said several times they're committed to resuming the war after the truce ends. So with that in mind, we know humanitarian groups, they've been rushing to get as much aid as possible into Gaza. Talk to us about what the situation is like there right now and the feeling among those in Gaza about the war starting up again.
I think the feeling is dread, Joe. Palestinians inside Gaza have had these 4 days of relative quiet, without airstrikes all around them, without Israeli jets and drones overhead for the first time in 7 weeks. But they have used this time to count their losses. People have tried to go back to their homes to see if their homes are still standing. They've tried to contact their relatives to find out who's alive, who's dead. The death toll inside Gaza, more than 15,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Proportional for population, guys, that is the equivalent of more than 2 million Americans being killed over the last 7 weeks. We have seen humanitarian aid coming in the form of around 200 trucks every day over the course of the ceasefire. That is welcome. It is also, as you heard from the Secretary General of the United Nations, just a fraction of what Gaza needs. So people have been painfully aware that this ceasefire was temporary, and we have seen Prime Minister Netanyahu literally inside Gaza saying that the war will continue on the other side of it. Guys.
Aaron, quickly, before we let you both go, we know Secretary Blinken is expected to return to the region this week. This is on another diplomatic mission, and it also looks like the first round specifically of U.S. aid to Gaza will be arriving soon. Tell us about that.
We did learn from a senior administration official last night that there are 3 U.S. military facilitated flights of humanitarian aid that will go into Egypt. The first one expected to land today. That material will be offloaded into United Nations vehicles and then taken into Gaza. This will be food, water, medicine, and importantly, winter gear, as winter is coming in Gaza. And so they want to help folks be able to be prepared for that. And as you noted, Secretary Blinken is headed back to Tel Aviv and to the West Bank, again, to talk about increasing humanitarian aid, about how to better protect civilians as Israel is engaged in its ground operations as well. And also about, the State Department noted he will talk about the two-state solution, the idea that eventually this will need to lead to a Palestinian state living next to an Israeli state. Savannah, Joe.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much. We're going to let you go. Raf, stay with us a moment longer. We know you've been speaking with some Israeli hostages about their time in captivity. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of the big questions over the last 7 weeks has been what kind of conditions are these hostages being held in inside of Gaza? Are they being abused? Are they getting food? Are they getting medicine? Can they see the sun? Are they being held in tunnels? And we're starting to get answers to some of those questions as these released hostages tell their families, and we speak to those family members. I want you to take a listen to a little bit of what we've been hearing.
Amid tearful scenes of hostages reuniting with their families, we're learning new details about their time in captivity and the conditions that around 170 remaining hostages are enduring still. 9-year-old Ohad Munder Zakri was released Friday with his mother Karen and grandmother Ruth. They spent 49 days in Gaza as prisoners of Hamas.
They were with one guy who kept them all the time, and she told me that all the time he did like that. So they were scared, they were whispering.
Were they ever tortured by Hamas?
No, I don't think so.
The family says they never saw other hostages and were moved constantly, sometimes held in tunnels like this, other times in houses or apartments.
They didn't get a lot of food. To go to the bathroom, they had to knock on the door, and then 1.5 hours waiting or 2 hours.
Cut off from the world, they had no idea about the scale of the October 7th attack or the global effort to bring them home.
She told me, I was on the television? Are you serious? I told her, your picture is all over the world.
They also didn't know Ohad's grandfather was alive, but remains a hostage, and found out they were being freed just hours before it happened. 25-year-old Roni Krivoy escaped and was on the run inside Gaza for 4 days before he was recaptured, his family says. Until now, most of what we knew came from Yocheved Lifshitz, one of the first hostages freed more than a month ago.
There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
The hostages may have valuable intelligence for Israel's military, but experts say the hostages need time to adjust.
They come out extremely anxious, suspicious, passive. They were passive for a long time. So there is a lot of work to be done in order to give them their sense of agency back.
Israel's government issuing guidelines for dealing with released children, saying expect age-inappropriate behavior like bedwetting, limit the number of visitors to keep them from being overwhelmed, and offer reassurance that they're safe now. Doctors say most of the children are in good health, and Ohad is now back home. But he has a long journey ahead just to be a kid again.
Now, the kids, thankfully, seem to be in good condition, but there is one older former hostage who is in serious medical condition right now. 84-year-old great-grandmother Elma Avraham was rushed straight to the ICU after she was released from Gaza on Sunday night. Hospital staff say she's on a ventilator and she's fighting for her life. Guys.
All right, Raph, as always, thank you for your thoughtful and compassionate reporting. Appreciate it. On the other side of the exchange, Palestinian women, even teenagers, are waking up at home this morning. Some were convicted of serious crimes, but others were held in administrative detention, not formally charged with anything. NBC's David Noriega spoke to the father of one of those teens who's now back home.
Jubilation in the West Bank as Palestinian women and children are freed from military jails, part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. That is a Red Cross bus carrying the prisoners in question. Among them, 17-year-old Iyas Khatib. His father Abed was there to greet him.
My son, he was just studying. He's in the high school. Till now, I'm telling you, I don't know why my son is in jail.
Israel calls these prisoners terrorists. Of those slated for release, some were convicted in Israeli military courts of violent crimes, including attempted murder. Others stand accused of offenses like throwing incendiary devices, throwing stones, or trespassing. But most have not been convicted, and many are teenagers held under what's known as administrative detention. That includes Iyas, with no formal charges or evidence presented against them. In February, IDF soldiers raided his home in the middle of the night, leaving behind a broken door and a family wondering when or if he would be back. Palestinian and international human rights groups say the system of military arrests and detentions lacks basic due process, especially when it comes to children.
Without charges, without trial, without anything, I can't defend myself, for instance, if I have no evidence, if I have no accusation specific.
And this happens regularly to children, to minors.
Yeah.
According to Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Israel had more than 1,300 people in administrative detention, including 23 children, before October 7th. And Palestinian groups say the number has skyrocketed since then. Palestinians in the occupied territories say these indefinite detentions without trial or evidence are just one of many ways the Israeli military occupation robs them of their basic human rights and dignity. Israeli authorities defend the practice, telling us in a statement that all prisoners are detained according to the provisions of the law. Before their release, they were told if they celebrated publicly or spoke to the press, they would face a fine of more than $18,000. We met Iyas Khatib the day after he came home. Are you willing to talk to me about your arrest and detention? He refused to talk, afraid Israeli soldiers would retaliate.
Our thanks to David Noriega for that report. Even before October 7th, the number of people held in administrative detention in reportedly deteriorating prison conditions had reached record highs. Even as people are being released as part of the ceasefire agreement, more are being arrested.
Well, President Biden has condemned the shooting of 3 Palestinian students in Vermont over the weekend, saying there is no place for hate in America. The suspect accused of carrying out the attack, which injured all 3 men, was arraigned yesterday. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
48-year-old Jason Eaton pleaded not guilty to attempted murder, accused of shooting 3 U.S. college students, all Palestinians, in Burlington, Vermont, visiting family for Thanksgiving.
This horrific, unprovoked attack was a tragic violation of the values and character of this welcoming, inclusive community.
The family says Tahsin Ali Ahmed, Hisham Awartani, and Kenan Abdelhamid were out for a walk, chatting in Arabic and English. 2 of them were wearing keffiyehs, traditional Arab scarves. According to the affidavit, Abdelhamid told police a man in a hoodie walked toward them and pulled out a pistol and started firing without saying a word. All 3 were shot.
They're all stable, but Hisham the prognosis is that it's very likely that he won't be able to walk again.
Hisham's parents spoke with NBC News' Aaron McLaughlin at their home in the West Bank city of Ramallah.
It was a vicious crime, and it will change my son's life. Forever. There's no reason that he should have been targeted in this way, because it was a targeted crime, without a doubt.
Authorities have not charged Eaton with a hate crime, but police say they are still investigating.
I do want to be clear that there is no question this was a hateful act.
It comes during a nationwide spike in both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic incidents.
All of us have also seen a sharp increase in the volume and frequency of threats against Jewish, Muslim, and Arab communities across our countries.
The war overseas fueling protests and hate nationwide.
We need to preach that all hate against Jews, against Muslims, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, these are ills. in our country, and they undermine our democratic values.
Do you think that is a message we're hearing from leaders in this country?
There's some lip service being paid to this, Stephanie, but it's not backed by really sincere efforts.
Palestinian-American Amani Jamal is the Dean of International Affairs at Princeton. She went to the same high school in the West Bank as the three young men.
These students are me 30 years ago. And our dream was to come to the United States to get an education so that we could live a life of dignity and freedom.
Hisham Awartani's father wanted him to stay in the U.S. for the holidays because he thought it would be safer than Ramallah.
Who would think that such a thing would happen in one of the most liberal, diverse places in the world?
He hopes his son will be able to walk again.
We believe in our kid's strength, and we are certain that he's going to stand up on his feet again.
We're learning more about the shooter. We learned that he was let go from his job earlier this month. Also, authorities say they found multiple weapons in his home, including 3 shotguns and the pistol that was allegedly used in the shooting. According to the affidavit, when police arrived at his home for the search, he said to them, "I've been waiting for you." Back to you.
All right, Stephanie Gusk, thank you so much.
Over the weekend, a U.S. Navy warship came under missile fire in the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. military says the missiles were fired Sunday from rebel-controlled Yemen after the warship responded to a distress call. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubie has more.
Militants believed to be Iranian-backed Houthi fighters fired 2 close-range ballistic missiles from Yemen that landed near a U.S. Navy warship, the USS Mason. Now, the USS Mason was not impacted. In fact, the 2 close-range ballistic missiles landed about 10 nautical miles away from the ship. But it all came just about 2 hours after the USS Mason responded to a distress call from a commercial tanker, the MV Central Park, that had been hijacked by pirates. Now, these pirates, who are now believed to be Somali citizens, according to U.S. defense officials, took over that ship. The crew locked themselves on the bridge and issued that distress call. The USS Mason, along with at least 1 other Allied ship that was in the region as part of a counter-piracy mission, responded. When they got on scene, they ordered these gunmen to leave the ship, which they quickly did. They got in their small boat and started to flee. Well, a boarding team from the USS Mason followed them and ultimately apprehended them. Now, we at this point, we still don't know exactly who these individuals are, other than the fact that they claim to be Somali citizens. But at this point, it doesn't seem that these 2 incidents are linked, the hijacking of this commercial tanker and the firing of these ballistic missiles. But it all comes at a time when the tensions in this region continue to be high. Now, Houthi fighters in Yemen have shown more aggressive behavior in recent weeks, and they have shown increasingly escalatory capabilities with the firing of these missiles, with drones that they have launched out of Yemen. And the concern among U.S. officials is that if this behavior continues, one of these attacks could be successful, and it could really lead to a further escalation of the tensions and a further expansion of the war in Israel and in Gaza. Now, this also comes as U.S. defense officials say there have been at least 73 attacks against bases housing Americans in Iraq and Syria. It's important to point out that while there had been a really steady drumbeat of these attacks since October 17th, since the truce in Gaza began, none of the bases have been attacked.
All right, our thanks to Courtney Cubie for that report. Well, cold air and gusty winds over the Great Lakes will lead to more snow in the region. Let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman is tracking just how much snow to expect. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. It's the Great Lakes that we are going to watch all through the day today to pick up some additional snow right along those edges. You can see places like Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Cleveland waking up to a little more snow falling. And yes, those strong winds over the lake are going to continue this through the day today. Because of that, we've got millions of people under these alerts for winter weather. We've got some winter weather advisories that include Traverse City, Kalamazoo. Notice the bright blue, though. Places like Erie, Cleveland, Watertown, all included in that lake effect snow warning as we see some of that additional snow falling through the day today. Here's what it looks like as we go through the rest of your day. Much of that will start to taper off over portions of Michigan and Ohio, but we still will have places like Pennsylvania and New York picking up some of that additional snow. We're going to also note that there will be a reduced visibility because of those stronger winds. Roads will be difficult to travel in those regions with really slick conditions. So a heads up if you're going to be out and about through the day today and even into tomorrow in some of those same regions near Ontario and Erie. That's where we'll watch for more snow to be a potential here as we get into your Wednesday. It looks like some of those highest amounts are going to be focused into portions of New York. You can see those brighter pinks and purples indicating 6 to 8 inches, but we could even see some isolated amounts up to 16 inches. So some impressive snowfall that will make it a little difficult to travel in this region. Meanwhile, we've got some chilly conditions across the southeast, waking up to some alerts there for the chilly weather. So heads up, you'll need those extra layers across portions of the southeast, including Tallahassee, Savannah. Out west, really quiet weather pattern. It's going to stay that way for a couple more days. We've got plenty of sunshine on tap for folks across Texas with temperatures into the 60s. In LA, low 70s. So nice conditions there as we deal with the wintry weather here across portions of the Great Lakes. The change up happens for parts of the south as we get into Thursday and Friday as we track our new storm system that'll bring us some rain there.
Layers seems to be the word of the week.
It is,
definitely dropped here. Thanks, Angie. We are back now with the race for the White House as the campaign of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis struggles to regain momentum. A fight nearly broke out this month at a board meeting of a DeSantis-aligned super PAC. As NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns explains, this comes as DeSantis is losing ground to rival Nikki Haley in the polls.
Thank you. Turmoil in DeSantis' world. NBC News reporting inside high-level strategy talks at DeSantis super PAC Never Back Down that one board meeting earlier this month nearly ended in a brawl as the Florida governor's allies struggle to reverse a slide in the polls and a surging Nikki Haley.
The race is always framed around Donald Trump, whether someone can beat him or not. People want an alternative, and they made a summary judgment on DeSantis that he wasn't it because his polling numbers were very, very high. And then they just simply tanked.
A source inside the room telling NBC News during a heated discussion, a longtime DeSantis confidant challenged a PAC consultant to a fight. At least 2 other board members forced to restrain him.
People are frustrated and they have different ideas of how to regain the high ground and how to win. And that's going to come out in emotion.
The internal strife at the PAC playing out as the group struggles to tap its big dollar donors. One contributor telling NBC News, quote, "You don't just keep throwing money at Radio Shack." Amid the latest troubles, the PAC CEO, Chris Jankowski, announcing his resignation last week.
I love you too.
Nikki Haley, now the biggest threat to the DeSantis campaign, has pulled even with him in Iowa and ahead of him in other primary states. DeSantis and his allies taking the battle for early state voters to the air.
We know her as Crooked Hillary, but to Nikki Haley, she's her role model, the reason she ran for office.
Fight Right, Inc., a new DeSantis-allied super PAC, launched after that chaotic meeting at Never Back Down, cutting this spot, tying Haley to Hillary Clinton. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds following up her endorsement of DeSantis, cutting multiple spots, praising her fellow Republican governor.
If you like what we're doing in Iowa, then you'll love what Ron DeSantis will do for this country.
And DeSantis securing another coveted endorsement, Bob Vanderplaats, an influential evangelical leader in the Hawkeye state.
You need a president that's going to surround themselves with the best and brightest people versus having a hard time attracting them again. And someone who's actually going to do what they say they're going to do.
DeSantis barnstorming Iowa in a 99-county tour, now just 7 weeks out from the Iowa caucuses, and preparing for a highly anticipated debate with California Governor Gavin Newsom, as the man who was once the shining star of the GOP is now looking for a spark.
Well, that was Dasha Burns reporting there for us. DeSantis' highly anticipated debate against California Governor Gavin Newsom will take place Thursday night in Georgia, and the next GOP primary debate is next Wednesday, December 6th in Alabama. Lots to watch for there. Well, nearly 10 years after more than 200 passengers went missing aboard Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, their relatives are suing for millions of dollars in damages. A compensation hearing is now underway in China for the flight that was lost over the Indian Ocean on March 8th, 2014. Here's NBC News correspondent Noah Pransky with more.
The biggest mystery of 2014 still largely unsolved today.
Malaysia Airlines 777 has been lost.
A massive multinational surge.
Not a shred of debris from the aircraft has been spotted or found.
Families of those missing passengers still seeking answers nearly a decade later beginning another process this week, seeking compensation. According to Reuters, they're asking a Chinese court to force 4 companies to pay them millions in damages.
I ask for the restart of the search, and also for Malaysia Airlines to reestablish communication with us and provide us with psychological assistance.
In March of 2014, Flight 370 vanished just 38 minutes after taking off from Kuala Lumpur en route to Beijing. What followed was one of the largest search missions the world has ever seen. 8 countries, 19 ships, 22 airplanes, scouring almost 5 million square miles of ocean. All turning up nothing. There was wall-to-wall media coverage, but as days turned into weeks, then into months, new questions arose as to how a plane with radio and black box equipment could just vanish. Social media then stoked the flames of conspiracy, including one discredited theory the plane safely landed at a secret location, but officials were unconvinced.
All 239 of the passengers and crew are presumed to have lost their lives.
And every few months after that, another piece of debris, believed to be from Flight 370, would wash up along the coast of Africa and various islands. Now, nearly a decade after the disappearance, the first semblance of any good news for the families involved.
It has been about 10 years that the court finally opened the case, which we think is a relief and a turning point. But the deterioration of the living conditions of the families, that does make us feel very sad.
Details of the lawsuit remain vague, and NBC News has not seen the suit, but Chinese state media reports families are seeking up to $11 million each in damages for the failure to properly track the plane. Malaysia Air, along with 2 other companies at the center of the lawsuit, did not provide comment to NBC, but a representative from a 4th corporation, Boeing, told us, "Our thoughts continue to be with those who are on board MH370 and their loved ones." Some loved ones, though, still not satisfied with those thoughts.
We go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs every day to make a claim, and nobody cares about us.
Our thanks to Noah Pransky for that report. Let's get you more international headlines now, starting with new developments for an American reporter being detained in Russia. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Levanga joins us now with that and more. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. That's right. A court in Moscow today extended the detention of Evan Gershkovich by at least 2 more months. Now, the 32-year-old Wall Street Journal reporter who was arrested in March on espionage charges will remain in jail at least until January the 30th. So far, Russia has not provided any evidence to support the allegations, and the journalist, the Wall Street Journal, and the U.S. government have denied the allegations. Let's now go to Poland, where on Monday the new president swore in a government expected to last only, or maximum, 14 days. There is a reason for it. According to the constitution, Poland's prime minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, has 2 weeks to face a vote of confidence in parliament after his government has been sworn in. But Morawiecki is expected to lose the vote of confidence, as after the national elections in October, he lost the majority in parliament and has no coalition partners. The opposition, who won the election, called the move a farce intended to delay them from taking power. And let's end this tour of the world in Brazil, where paleontologists and geologists are unveiling the scary mystery behind a huge underground 60-feet-long tunnel a farmer discovered by chance on his property back in 2009. Now, experts believe the farmer uncovered what they call a megafauna paleobarrow, a prehistoric tunnel. Deep claw marks embedded into the walls indicated its past occupant was not human. Instead, experts believe it was dug through rock at least 10,000 years ago by a giant creature that looked like a ground sloth, an armadillo, or a hamster, but the size of an elephant.
Oh.
That is scary.
What a way to put it. Terrifying. All right, Claudio, thank you very much. Yeah. We are back with an alarming number of respiratory illnesses being reported in some parts of China. Health officials say RSV cases are on the rise among children, resulting in crowded waiting rooms. It comes as China experiences its first full winter since loosening COVID restrictions. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has the details.
These scenes of packed hospital waiting rooms raising alarm in China as it grapples with a spike in respiratory illnesses, mostly in children. The World Health Organization is asking for more information. Here, flu is now spreading across the U.S., the CDC reporting a nearly 4% increase in flu-related doctor's visits. The Southeast hit especially hard, but not like last year's triple-demic, flu, COVID, and RSV. Doctors say RSV cases are on the rise.
We've actually seen a tremendous increase in the number of children who we have diagnosed with RSV over the past 7 to 8 weeks. Probably some of the highest that we've seen all season.
Dr. Shane thinks cases have peaked at her hospital. They're increasing among children at GBMC Healthcare in Maryland. But a new preventive antibody called Beyfortus is in short supply.
How many doses did you get and how many doses do you need?
I need a whole lot more than what I've gotten. I have gotten, received less than 50.
Dr. Teresa Wynn says it is crucial expectant moms get the RSV vaccine made for them.
Pregnant mothers between 32 to 36 weeks can get the vaccine, and if there's been 4 weeks, they have made antibodies and have passed it on to their infants at birth.
Though the CDC says 77,000 additional doses will be made available, it's advising doctors to prioritize those who need it, including infants 6 months and younger or with underlying conditions. So why is there a shortage of Beyfortus? Well, we called the manufacturer, Sanofi Pasteur, and it says despite an aggressive supply plan, demand is simply higher than anticipated. So in the meantime, doctors suggest that everyone over the age of 60 get the RSV vaccine to help stop the spread and protect the youngest and most vulnerable among us, especially during the holiday season. I'm Ann Thompson in New York. Now back to you.
All right. Thank you, Ann, for that report. Well, NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar is here on set with us to help break this down. Dr. Azar, always great to see you. So just, I mean, how concerned should we be about this?
Well, I think we all have a little bit of PTSD from COVID. So when you hear undiagnosed pneumonia, children being affected, hospitals being overrun, something originating in China, you immediately think, oh, no, this is going to be COVID 2.0.
Totally.
But the World Health Organization asked to do an investigation, and they've been working closely with Chinese health officials. And as it turns out, really what they are seeing is their first fall and winter season after they lifted their COVID-19 restrictions. So very similar, I think you guys may recall last year at this time, we were dealing with the worst cases of flu since 2010, and we had a bump in RSV cases. So what they're seeing is this rise in predictable respiratory viruses in children who otherwise weren't, hadn't built up that immunological defense over the last couple of years because they just didn't have the same number of bugs circulating.
Okay. You mentioned PTSD. We see images in China. We think back to COVID. Started in China, happened here. Is that an indication that what we're seeing in China is what's going to happen here?
So probably not, and that's the good thing. And I'm like everybody else. When you hear this, you start, oh no, what's going on? And by the way, that shouldn't make us think let's just relax, because there are always going to be potential emerging infectious disease threats. But in this situation, I think really what officials are thinking is that this is really the first time since 2020 that China has truly lifted its COVID-19 restrictions. And you have a population, primarily children, who, because of all of the restrictions that were in place, you didn't have the typical bacteria and viruses circulating. These kids don't have those defenses, right? This is, you know, the sort of upside downside of having infectious diseases circulating is that we do build up defenses to common respiratory illnesses, including RSV.
All right, so it sounds like we can kind of take a beat on freaking out over this.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's what's coming for us, but tell us what you do think we can expect in terms of RSV, flu, COVID here in the U.S.
Absolutely. So, you know, I think that RSV is usually something that's going to circulate before flu and COVID. So in the earlier fall to winter is when we're expecting to see RSV. And as Ann pointed out in her piece, the concern, of course, is that monoclonal antibody, which is so protective for infants up to 8 months, it's been in short supply. So as a mom who formerly had very, very young children, that would be something that I would be very anxious to do, and I would urge parents to talk to their pediatricians about that. But otherwise, I think in this year so far, we're seeing pockets where we're seeing little bumps and rises of COVID as well as hospitalizations. Definitely have seen a significant bump in flu cases. This is all predictable and anticipated. All three diseases have protections, many of them antivirals if you get sick, and many of them vaccines to prevent.
There we go. Dr. Azar, thank you so much.
Thanks. Welcome back. We've got some breaking data on Cyber Monday sales just in this morning.
CNBC's Silvana Hanau is with us with that data and some other money headlines for you. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, Cyber Monday spending estimated to top a record $12 billion this year, which is up about 10% from last year. Bargain hunting Americans jumped on deals on headphones, smartwatches, Barbie dolls, and Legos. That's all according to Adobe Analytics. And retailers counted on deep discounts to convince those inflation-wary shoppers to open their wallets, and it seems to have worked. Well, it may not matter if you misplace your work ID, because soon all you might need is your hand. Amazon is rolling out its palm scanning technology for businesses. The tech giant is pitching the hand-waving technology as a cheaper and more secure solution when compared to traditional tools, including fobs, badges, or passwords. Currently, Amazon uses the biometric system for shoppers to pay for purchases by swiping their hands at Whole Foods and at some Amazon Go convenience stores. History is being made over the Atlantic Ocean today. A Virgin Atlantic passenger jet took off this morning from London, headed to New York, and it will be powered by 100% sustainable aviation fuel. The low-carbon fuel is made from waste and can reduce emissions by up to 70%. Today's flight on the Virgin Boeing 787 will mark the first time a commercial airline has flown long-haul fully on the sustainable fuel, guys. How about that?
Right, pretty cool. Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
It is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which means thousands of people are taking part in what's now known as Giving Tuesday.
Yeah, it's an annual tradition to support local and international causes closest to your heart.
So no one better bring in than the Chief Executive Officer of GoFundMe, Tim Cadogan, with more on this. Good to have you with us. So what is it that GoFundMe is expecting this year, and today, how could it compare with last year?
Well, last year we saw over $50 million raised on GoFundMe and Classy, which supports nonprofits. So we hope, based on this year's trends, to exceed that.
And what are some of the biggest charities that receive donations on Giving Tuesday?
Well, as an example of some of the big charities we work with, World Central Kitchen, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the Salvation Army. Those are some examples. In general, charities will expect to see about 10x their normal giving on Giving Tuesday.
Wow.
That is huge. And beyond so many people, maybe they're tapped out after spending so much money on either Black Friday or on Cyber Monday. If they don't want to give money, what are some other ways that people can give today?
Really, really helpful to spread the word. So just sharing a campaign or sharing the link of a nonprofit that you support with your friends and your family and network actually makes a tremendous difference. So you don't need just to give money. You can just use your voice to share the word.
Wow, it's pretty interesting. Also, explain to people, so on GoFundMe, a lot of these charities you can give to, but this is something that's going on all over the place, right?
Absolutely. It's going on around the world. Giving Tuesday has been going for about 11 years, and it generates about $3 billion in total. So, yes, you can go to any nonprofit. Typically, they're often running matching campaigns. So even if you give a small amount of money, it can go twice as far, sometimes more than that. So you can give to anything that is close to your heart that you support.
That's what I was thinking about, is these matching campaigns. How have you seen that change over the years, the way employers have gotten involved with this?
Companies have definitely gotten involved. Foundations and some wealthy individuals have all realized that they can multiply their effect by providing matching grants and enabling people to have their money go further. So we've seen that grow significantly.
All right.
Very cool.
That's good. All right, Tim Cadogan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Good
Happy
to have
Giving
you with us.
Tuesday. Thanks for making the trip to New York. Welcome back. We've got Merriam-Webster's newly unveiled word of the year. It's all about keeping it real. The dictionary crowned authentic the 2023 word of the year, citing a high volume of searches online for stories and conversations about AI, celebrity culture, identity, and social media. Merriam-Webster says the word is often used by celebrities like Taylor Swift and Sam Smith, who made headlines this year with statements about seeking their authentic voice and authentic self. Joe? Have you found your authentic self?
I think so. I think I found my authentic self a long time ago.
There we go.
Who knows? How about you?
I think so too, but let's keep it real, you know, 2023, authentic.
We'll keep it real, all right, and into 2024.
Yeah.
All right, finally this hour, two sisters shared a dream of becoming Radio City Rockettes. Now they're sharing the spotlight in this year's Christmas Spectacular. I recently got a chance to meet a few of this year's Rockettes who are now in the middle of a marathon of holiday shows.
For so many of the Radio City Rockettes, before they were dancing on the stage, they were watching from the audience, including Jordan and Danielle Betcher.
You probably get this a lot, but are you sisters?
We are sisters, yes.
Danielle, the oldest, remembers seeing the Christmas Spectacular with her grandpa when she was 13.
And he must have seen that look on my face of just like pure joy, because he leaned in and he goes, you know, someday you could do that if you wanted to.
10 years ago, she did, and 7 years ago, her sister did. This year, for the first time, they're right next to each other on the kick line.
I just know that she has my back, both on and off stage.
Danelle Morgan also has their backs. She's a swing, ready to step in when someone is out.
It's an incredibly challenging job. We don't just learn the one track that a single Rockette will do in the show. We learn the entire show.
Sometimes do you only have like a moment's notice before you have to jump in?
There have been times where it's mid-show and then all of a sudden we're on the stage.
An 18-year Rockette vet, she knows her parents could be in that audience.
They pop up and they show up in the front row for a show where I'll hear my dad cheering and I'm like, oh my gosh, my parents are here. They didn't tell me they're here, but they're here, okay.
So your parents don't always warn you that they're coming?
Oh no, they don't always warn me. I can see my mom's glasses reflecting with the lights, and it's just really special to know that there's love coming at me while I'm performing.
Reminder, the Rockettes are not just in sync with each other, but with you too.
The Christmas Spectacular runs through January 1st at Radio City Music Hall. I still can't get over the swings who have to know literally every track, every person's track. And sometimes you're facing that way, sometimes you're facing that way, sometimes you're...
Oh my gosh.
It's unreal.
Right. Oh, they are just so good.
Exactly.
My favorite part is the toy soldier part where they all
the best.
Collapse.
My favorite part. I get anxious though every time.
I know,
because
like,
you just never know. Check it out.
I can't wait to see it.
All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us this Tuesday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, an extended truce in the Middle East this morning, with officials on both sides of the deadly conflict now agreeing to a longer pause in the violence in order to free more Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners and allow vital humanitarian aid to enter a besieged Gaza. We're on the ground with just how long this fragile ceasefire could actually last. Back home this morning, we're watching some wicked weather that's hitting the Midwest and Northeast. Millions of Americans waking up to mounds of snow around the Great Lakes and beyond, with even more of the white stuff expected today. We've got the latest track as a late November cold snap rattles temperatures from coast to coast. Also this morning, we are saying one final farewell to former First Lady Rosalynn Carter with a memorial service in Atlanta later today that's expected to draw some of the biggest names in Washington, past and present, including President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. We're also expecting a rare public appearance from former President Jimmy Carter as he lays his longtime partner to rest. And today is Travel Tuesday, coming on the heels of a record-breaking Thanksgiving weekend at America's airports. Later in the hour, we're going to bring you all the steals and deals for your 2024 getaways. Never too early to start thinking about vacation next year, right?
I am overwhelmed by how many things we're supposed to be thinking about buying in this like 4-day span.
Plus you have to give today too.
Yes, exactly, and donate.
We're going to begin this hour in the Middle East, where a newly extended truce between Israel and Hamas appears to be holding.
Yeah, the 48-hour ceasefire extension agreed to yesterday is expected to allow for more hostages and prisoner releases, as well as further aid getting into Gaza. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the latest from Tel Aviv.
As the deal was set to expire late last night, Israel and Hamas agreed to a 2-day extension. That means today and tomorrow, Israel is not carrying out its bombing campaign to destroy and dislodge Hamas in Gaza. And Hamas is expected sometime today to release at least 10 more hostages, 10 more tomorrow, in exchange for dozens of freed Palestinian prisoners. Under armed guard, Hamas handed over 11 hostages, 2 women and 9 children, to the Red Cross last night, including 2 3-year-old twin girls. They were whisked into Israel for medical checks and then reunited with their families. All of the hostages freed yesterday were taken by Hamas on October 7th from a single kibbutz near Oates, near the Gaza border, including 12-year-old Erez and 16-year-old Sahar Calderon. Their father, Ofer, like all of the kidnapped men, remains a hostage.
Bring them home and to be again big, happy family. So let's go, let's bring them back.
But Hamas isn't the only group in Gaza holding hostages. Others have around 40, including, according to the Israeli military, 10-month-old Kafir Bibas, whose mother and siblings were also captured. Critically, the Israel-Hamas hostage deal is allowing more aid into Gaza, which has been devastated by Israeli airstrikes and tank fire. Before and after pictures show wide-scale destruction, with 80% of the population displaced, according to the UN. Truce or not, we still have no electricity, no water, and none of life's basic necessities, said this man. In Israel, the hostages are staying in hospitals until they're ready to go home. So far, only one American has been set free in this truce, 4-year-old Israeli-American Abigail Idan. Her mother and father were killed. She was sheltered by neighbors until Hamas discovered them and took them all hostage. We spoke to her aunt at a hospital near Tel Aviv, where Abigail and most of the freed children are staying.
Her story is so difficult because she went through hell and now she has no parents.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to her?
Well, the family is going to take care of her. There's a lot of family around her. I know, like in Israel, people feel that she's the Israel baby. She's the Israeli baby of everyone.
The first of 3 American aid flights containing aid for the people of Gaza arrive in Egypt today. The aid will then be trucked into the Gaza Strip. It includes food, medicine, and winter clothing.
All right, Richard Engel, thank you so much. For more, we are now joined by longtime former NBC News correspondent and Tel Aviv bureau chief Martin Fletcher, who has been joining us throughout this conflict. Martin, good morning. Thank you very much for being with us. So we now have this additional 2 days of this truce with the additional potential for these 10 hostages to be released, 10 today, 10 tomorrow. Hamas, though, still has dozens of hostages. So how big of an impact do you feel? How hopeful does this make you that future negotiations could continue to have hostages released when we know that those next 20 will still mean there are several in captivity?
Well, you know, it's actually more than several dozen. There's about 150 hostages still left in Hamas hands, and the negotiations are continuing to extend this 2-day ceasefire. But the Israelis have said that they've said very clearly that they're not going to extend any ceasefires beyond 10 days. That's the Israeli maximum, 10 days. And today we would be in day 5 of that. So the hostages still held by Hamas. You know, there's a limited number who could be released in the next days if it's 10 days, if it's 10 hostages released every day. And there's still children held by Hamas. So the Israelis are very concerned about it. There's one family, the Bibas family, they have a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old baby who's still held hostage by Hamas. And actually that became more complicated because the Israeli army has said that Hamas has moved that Bibas family to another group in Gaza. It's not clear who. So the hostages still held in Gaza are still being divided among different groups in Gaza holding them. So it's a very complex situation to get more out. But then, as I say, according to Israel, 5 more days maximum is what they're saying. Then they're going to go back to war.
Complex. And Martin, a reminder to our viewers, personal for you and your family. You have relatives who were taken hostage last month, later released, one still being held by Hamas. Just what's been the reaction in your family and with people you've spoken with in Israel to these hostage and prisoner releases and this temporary truce?
Well, everybody wants all the hostages back. And Israel's divided. It's a kind of manic depressive place. You know, on the one hand, there's joy that the hostages are being released. On the other hand, there's sorrow that more hostages are being held still to be released. And there's also the overwhelming issue in Israel is to destroy Hamas so that this can never happen again. The calls for a ceasefire in Israel are seen as a way of letting Hamas off the hook. You know, Hamas has said repeatedly that they're going to do this again and again until they've destroyed Israel. And they say in their charter to kill the Jews. So on the one hand, there's this need to get the hostages back, but there's another overwhelming need, which is to make sure that Hamas can never do this again.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has continued to say, as we've been discussing here, that the destruction of Hamas is the ultimate goal here. I do want to read something from the New York Times here, though, quoting President Biden saying, hopes to influence any fresh military action, ensuring that it is more targeted and does more to avoid civilian casualties. Do you think we could see a different approach from Israel after the pause? Is that possible?
Well, the United States is demanding a different approach from Israel after this pause. They want to make sure that there's no continuation of this humanitarian disaster. And every sign is that if Israel does attack the south of Gaza, it could be even worse than it was in the north, because most of the population from the north is now in the south. So you've got about 2 million Palestinians in the southern half of Gaza. So whereas before they were spread out over all of Gaza, now they're concentrated in the south. So Israel cannot really continue the campaign in the same way as it did before of bombing its way into the enemy, if you like, of clearing the way for the Israelis' ground forces by bombing from the air. You know, when you've got so many people focused and concentrated in such a small area, that's going to be another humanitarian disaster, greater probably than what we've seen already. So America wants that not to happen, and Israel is finally looking for a way to destroy Hamas, which it knows is hiding among that Palestinian population in the south of Gaza. So Israel's work is the future is very tough for Israel's military. How do you destroy Hamas when they're hiding within the civilian population? That was a problem before. It's a problem. It's a double the size problem now, because, as I say, most of the population of Gaza is concentrated in only half of the territory. And that's where Israel has to go to war to fight Hamas. So a humanitarian disaster, even greater than before, is in the offing. At a time, by the way, when the weather is changing, it's winter now, there's heavy rain in that area, there's a possible problem of disease spreading among the Palestinians. So this is a horrific situation which can only be really ended by some kind of long-term ceasefire which sees the end of Hamas. That's what Israel wants, but it's not what Hamas wants, obviously.
Martin Fletcher, as always, we so appreciate your perspective and also you sharing personally what your family's going through. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Joe.
As Richard Engel reported a moment ago, 4-year-old Abigail Moore-Edan was the youngest American taken hostage. She was released on Sunday, just days after turning 4 while in captivity. Members of Abigail's family spoke out earlier this morning on Today for the first time since she was freed. Here's part of that conversation.
Well, first, we're thrilled that she is released. Abigail was held hostage with a mother and her 3 kids. And that was a blessing because she had a mother who could hold her and comfort her in the darkness for 50 days. Abigail is with family. She's with her aunt, her grandmother. They met her. She's been reunited with her brother and her sister. And that was magical in the sense that a brother and sister who for 50 days waited and hoped that Abigail would come home. And Abigail, when she saw them, was just elated, and with her cousins as well. And so it's going to be a very slow process, and it's 50 days and having seen her parents murdered, but at least she is now home safe with her family, and we can only pray and hope as the days go on that she will be able to live a good life.
Noah, will you tell us about Abigail? We all do sort of feel like we know her. As they said, you know, she's Israel's child. Tell us about her. What's she like?
She's a sweet and feisty girl. She likes to boss around her brother and sister, to chase a soccer ball with her brother and her cousins, who are very good soccer players. I mean, you can see on her smile, she's just a sweet girl that as far as we know, still has a love of life.
It's just horrific when you learn about the details of what happened to Abigail. I mean, her father was killed holding her, trying to protect her. Her mother was killed, her siblings right behind a partition, and had to witness that. How do you rebuild, Liz? I know she is surrounded by family and you will envelop her in love, but what are your hopes for her?
Well, my hopes are that she can live a private life where she can be with her family. Her aunt, who is the sister of Smadar, who was murdered, will be raising her with her husband, Zoli, and with their 3 kids. So this family will be 6 children. And I know that they will get lots of love. The grandparents are very involved in her life. And what I hope for her is that she will be embraced and she'll go back out and play soccer with her siblings and go back to school.
Abigail's family calls her the hope for the future. They hope she will be able to live her life and have as normal a childhood as possible.
Well, President Biden and the First Lady will be in Atlanta this morning to give their final respects to former First Lady Rosalynn Carter at a memorial service. She passed away last week at the age of 96. Former President Jimmy Carter, her husband of nearly 80 years, is also expected to attend. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander is in Atlanta with more. Hey, Blaine, good morning.
Well, Savannah, good morning to you. We have already seen hundreds of people coming out to give tribute to Mrs. Carter. In fact, many of those arrived by busload yesterday at the Carter Center. But perhaps the most notable of the attendees today will be her husband, the former President Jimmy Carter. You know, we know that he made the more than 150-mile journey from Plains up here to Atlanta. We're told he was in town yesterday resting. This is going to be a very rare public appearance for the former president as he prepares to say goodbye to his wife of 77 years. With one last ride through her beloved home state of Georgia, this morning a fond farewell for former First Lady Rosalynn Carter. Today's memorial service, on the second of a 3-day tribute, is expected to draw a host of White House occupants, past and present, including her husband of nearly 8 decades, former President Jimmy Carter. It would be a rare public appearance for the 99-year-old former commander-in-chief who entered hospice care in February and was last seen in September riding through the Plains Peanut Parade with his wife by his side. Also set to attend, President and Mrs. Biden, former President Clinton, and every living former First Lady, including Hillary Clinton, Laura Bush, Michelle Obama, and Melania Trump. It comes after a day of touching tributes throughout the state, starting in Mrs. Carter's hometown of Plains, then moving to her alma mater, Georgia Southwestern State University, where a pair of wreaths were placed near her statue on campus. Finally, to Atlanta's Carter Center, where lines of people paid their respects to the former First Lady, who, along with her husband, dedicated herself to humanitarian work after leaving the White House.
Her top priority was mental health. She advocated for changes in public policy and the availability of treatment for people who needed them and elimination of stigma.
Along the nearly 150-mile route, lines of crowds, school children, and grateful citizens all coming to say goodbye.
When you go to Plains and Miss Rosalynn would visit with her and she would walk you out the door. Even when she was frail, she would grab the walker and walk you out the door. Today we get an opportunity to walk her home.
And during today's service, her grandchildren will serve as pallbearers. We will also hear tributes from her close personal friends as well as her children. Now, after the conclusion of today's service, the motorcade will travel back down to Plains, Georgia, where she will be laid to rest tomorrow. Savannah.
All right, Blaine Alexander, thank you so much.
Millions of Americans are waking up this morning to an early glimpse of winter. Lake-effect snow piled up overnight in communities across the Midwest and Northeast, while folks along the East Coast are getting a blast of chilly temperatures. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch is in Erie, Pennsylvania with the latest on all the weather. Jesse, good morning.
Joe, good morning. And a cold one out here in Erie, PA. We've got these
brutal wind gusts just off of Lake Erie, and that's churning up the waters here. You can see we're at the bay right off of Lake Erie, and these are some pretty choppy waters right now. It's these blasts of cold air combining with these waters, which have been turning parts of the Great Lakes region into a snow globe overnight.
Following a stormy night of snow, blustery winds, and treacherous roads, this morning, millions are bracing for the possibility of even more.
This is a big storm to be our first storm of the year, so everyone's going to knock the rust off really quick.
In Michigan and New York, some communities seen up to a foot of snow or more since Monday. Drivers trapped and digging out, and some semi-trucks even stranded. And in some areas, it's still coming down. This early winter mess, courtesy of lake effect snow, which happens when frigid winds sweep across the Great Lakes and their relatively warm waters. Heat and moisture transform into clouds, dumping heavy snow in areas downwind. With snowplows gearing up, officials asking the public to prepare as well.
Travelers, please take your time.
And while this week's wintry weather is not backing up the nation's airports, some drivers are seeing major delays on the roads, like along the I-90 corridor in Erie, Pennsylvania, where numerous crashes were reported overnight. Thankfully, most Americans do not have to dig out this morning, but millions are waking up to frigid temperatures.
Bundle up the kids when you send them off to school.
The holiday season chill stretching along the East Coast and west to Chicago, bringing temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below average today.
If you're catching a flight this morning, most of you can breathe a sigh of relief. According to Flight Tracker FlightAware, we're not seeing many cancellations at all tied to U.S. airports this morning, Joe.
All right, some good news there. We take it. We'll take it. Jesse Kirsch, thank you so much.
And for more on those chilly temperatures, let's get a check at your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman's back with the latest. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Just like Jesse was layered up, I think a lot of folks are going to have to do exactly that before they head out the door this morning. We'll see continuing chilly conditions across most of the east. And I say that because the southeast is included as well, where we do have these alerts that are up because of temperatures this morning. We've got freeze warnings in effect for places like Charleston, Myrtle Beach, down towards Savannah and out towards Tallahassee and extending into parts of the Gulf Coast too. So chilly conditions for sure for folks there, and even colder here as we look up into portions of the Midwest and into the Northeast. We've got Chicago sitting at 15 degrees, but feeling like just 3 degrees this morning. Indianapolis right now into the teens as well and feeling like the single digits. A little farther south, places like Nashville into the 30s, but feeling like the 20s. The Northeast included in this as well, with the 30s for New York right now, but with that wind again into the mid-20s. So extra layers going to be necessary. We will see our temperatures end up into the upper 30s in New York today. That'll be better than, of course, what we're dealing with right now, but still running well below normal for this time of year. Indianapolis, we'll see temperatures in the high 20s later today. And as far south as Tallahassee, we'll just hang out into the 50s. We won't even get into the 60s this afternoon. So the cooler than normal temperatures continue today and into tomorrow too. But notice it's a smaller area. We start to see more seasonal conditions settling into parts of the Great Lakes and the Midwest. We'll end up into the 40s in Washington, D.C. But notice what happens by the time we get into Thursday, Friday, and eventually Saturday. 50s on tap for folks in Cincinnati. We'll hit the upper 50s in Richmond by Thursday and Friday, guys. So it'll be a little bit of a better kind of temperature situation for us. But of course, we'll deal with some rain for parts of the Southeast by the time Thursday and Friday roll around.
All right, there you go. Getting cold, Angie. Thank you.
Welcome back. The financial victims of disgraced lawyer and convicted killer Alec Murdaugh will have the chance to address him directly in a South Carolina courtroom today.
Murdaugh is set to be sentenced on almost 24 counts of financial crimes, including money laundering, fraud, and breach of trust. State prosecutors say Murdaugh carried out several schemes against his clients as well as his family's law firm. Today's sentencing follows a plea deal Murdaugh reached with prosecutors just days before his trial was set to start.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. So, Danny, first of all, remind us just this plea deal. What did both sides agree to here?
They agreed to him pleading guilty to all counts in the state court case. That does not cover the federal case. And, of course, it doesn't necessarily cover the sentencing issue, which is going to get really thorny in this case, because you have a situation where Murdaugh is being sentenced in state court first and then sentenced in federal court and then possibly sentenced again for financial crimes in state court. This gets really complex. The bottom line is he's going to be in all the prisons forever going forward.
So the judge says that he does fully intend, was the language that he used, to accept Murdoch's guilty plea, but does want to hear from the victims. Walk us through that process and why that needs to take place.
The modern trend is that victims should be heard in court, and many states have enacted statutes that require victims to be heard. Now, whether or not it affects the ultimate outcome in sentencing is probably, in my view, I don't think it makes a tremendous amount of difference. I think it's very cathartic for the victims. But in federal court, for example, the calculus in arriving at a recommended sentence in federal court depends much more heavily on the dollar loss to the victims, more so than their impact statements themselves. So that is some consolation to the victims that the amounts that Murdoch stole, if we were in federal court, for example, would count heavily towards a sentence in the stratosphere. So that is a good thing for victims.
You touched on the rundown of charges and convictions. Let's go through it again here. He's already serving 2 consecutive life sentences for the shooting deaths of his wife and son. His lawyers are seeking a new trial in that case. He's awaiting sentencing on those federal financial crime charges you mentioned, and he's still facing insurance fraud charges. How could the sentence here factor into all of that?
It could be a drop in the bucket, and that's the bottom line. I mean, you might ask the question rhetorically, why still fight? Why even fight the murder conviction? I mean, for prisoners, first, all they have to do is fight. That's what they do all day. I get their letters, so I know what I'm talking about. They spend all day writing, and any defense attorney will tell you they get letters all day from prisoners, hoping for some sliver of a possibility that they can turn over one conviction. If they begin with one, maybe they can turn over another one, and maybe, against all odds, they could breathe free air again. But in Murdoch's case, the odds of that are incalculably small.
All right. Danny Ceballos, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, let's get you some international headlines now. North Korea says its recently launched satellite has taken detailed photographs of the White House, the Pentagon, and nuclear aircraft carriers.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga joins us with that and other world headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Joe Savannah, good morning. That's right. Today, KCNA said that the spy satellite North Korea sent just a few days ago, or launched just a few days ago, started sending back images of several sensitive sites all across the United States. As you mentioned, the White House, the Pentagon, and U.S. nuclear aircraft carriers. But also, the KCNA said the satellites took pictures of a U.S. naval base, a shipyard, in an airfield in Virginia, among other places. Now, the news agency said the pictures were viewed by the country's leader, Kim Jong-un, but none of the images have been made public yet, and their existence has not been independently verified. Now, the White House says it strongly condemns the launch, adding that it violates UN Security Council resolutions because it used ballistic missile technology. Now, let's go to Russia now, where a snowstorm, hurricane winds, and heavy flooding battered the south of the country, including Ukrainian regions annexed by Moscow. According to local media, at least 4 people died and almost 2 million were left without power. One of the most affected areas is the Crimean Peninsula in the south of Ukraine, annexed by Russia in 2014. Officials there reported flooding in coastal areas, fallen trees, and the death of about 800 exotic fish in an aquarium destroyed by sea flooding in the port of Sevastopol. And let's end this tour of the world in, well, Princess Diana's wardrobe. A pink blouse worn by the late princess in 1981 will be sold at an auction next month. Diana wore the blouse while posing for a famous portrait taken when her engagement to then Prince Charles, now King Charles III, was announced. The photograph became an iconic image of the late princess, so go ahead, make your biddings, guys, but beware because it is expected to fetch up to $100,000.
Wow. I'm back into the crown, so I'm like so in Princess Diana land because
so you're into this?
Yes, yes.
And then we had the sheep sweater, now we have
Maybe I'll
this.
bid, yeah.
All up for sale. All right, Claudio, thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome back. Well, flu season is well underway, and states are seeing a spike in cases.
The CDC says the percentage of positive flu tests increased 4.9% last week. On top of that, flu-related doctors' visits increased by nearly 4%.
Joining us now for more on this is NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta. Doctor, good morning. Thanks for joining us. So what is behind the rise in flu cases that we're seeing? I mean, is this just to be expected as we head into winter?
Well, good morning, Savannah and Joe. This is to be expected, but just to point out, every flu season is different. We're seeing this flu season start off much more slowly than last year. About 12,000 hospitalizations, unfortunately, about 700 deaths so far. Dramatically lower, though, at this point relative to what we saw in 2022. So we're just seeing the beginning, probably going to see a peak in January, February of next year.
So right now, it's southeastern states that seem to be hit the hardest by this recent spike in flu cases. Do we know why that is and who is most at risk this season?
Well, Joe, candidly, what we've seen here is that the uptake of the flu vaccine in the southeast United States is lower than the rest of the country. So that's probably one reason why. This flu vaccine is about 80% effective against the existing strains. We're seeing spikes in Louisiana and South Carolina in particular, followed by Texas and Florida. So there is that corollary between decreased prevention measures like vaccination and this rise in hospitalizations.
So, Dr. Gupta, remind us the latest guidance on the flu vaccine. If you're someone who hasn't got it yet, what should you be doing to protect yourself?
Span, I'm glad you brought that up. If you're 60 and older, ask your doc about the quadrivalent vaccine. It's more protective, especially if you're medically high risk. If you're 6 months and older, you are qualifying for any type of flu shot. Critical to recognize that we're seeing rates about 5% lower than pre-pandemic levels. Also, just remember, if you're a parent with kiddos, young kiddos that are sick, keep them at home. Daycares across the country are urging that if parents do a self-triage of symptoms amongst your kids just to minimize spread. I'll also just critically say here, if you are somebody that's unwell, if you're feeling unwell, know your body. Know that within 48 hours of developing flu-like symptoms, treatment is available in the form of Tamiflu, but you have to know and present yourself to care to get tested. So don't just assume it's the common cold. If you're feeling unwell, seek medical attention, especially if you're high risk, because treatment can keep you out of the hospital.
Dr. Vin Gupta, as always, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for those important reminders.
Now to a new report on two popular weight loss drugs, Mounjaro and Ozempic.
Well, for the first time, researchers looked at real-world data on the two medications, comparing how much weight people lost in them. And get this, one came out way ahead.
NBC News business correspondent Christine Romans joins us now with more on this intriguing headline. Christine, good morning.
It is. Good morning to both of you. You know, this is a hot topic for sure.
Oh, yes.
This whole class of drugs, very exciting. According to the NIH, more than 2 out of every 5 adults in this country suffer from obesity. Wow. And we know from clinical trials that Ozempic and Mounjaro, they work really well to help people lose weight. But now a new analysis finds one of those drugs is the clear winner in getting results.
And Mounjaro can help decrease how much food you eat.
They're two of the most popular weapons in the battle against obesity. Now, a new report suggests one of these blockbuster drugs is far more effective in helping people slim down. The analysis looked at real-world data from about 18,000 overweight adults using Mounjaro or Ozempic over a year. It found those taking Mounjaro were 3 times more likely to lose 15% of their body weight than those on Ozempic, and more than 2.5 times more likely to lose 10% of their body weight. While not a peer-reviewed study, this echoes previous research that found Mounjaro more effective than Ozempic in helping some people with weight loss. Both drugs are taken through weekly injections and are FDA approved only for type 2 diabetes, not weight loss.
I've lost 17 pounds in 8 weeks.
But demand is soaring as more patients use them off-label to shed unwanted pounds. Doctors say they work by mimicking hormones in the gut tied to appetite.
The major difference between the two medications is that Mounjaro is working on 2 hormones and Ozempic is working on 1 hormone. So you're essentially getting more bang for the buck when you take Mounjaro.
After struggling with obesity her whole life, Tara Rothenhofer joined a clinical trial for Mounjaro. 3 years in, she says she's lost more than 200 pounds.
Instead of that feeling of looking towards your next meal while you're still eating the current meal, you're having more of that feeling of satisfaction, of enjoyment. You know, you have a few bites of something and you feel full.
Eli Lilly, maker of Mounjaro, says it'll soon release a version that's FDA approved for weight loss called Zepbound. In a statement, the maker of Ozempic, Novo Nordisk, told us their drug is only meant to treat type 2 diabetes. Its approved drug for weight loss, called Wegovy, is similar but at a higher dose than Ozempic. Experts caution the safety of these drugs is still unknown in healthy people who just want to lose a few pounds. They can have side effects like gastrointestinal distress, nausea, and vomiting, and they only curb hunger while being used.
For most patients, when you stop the medication, you will regain roughly 2/3 of that weight. This is not a medication that will reset you for life.
So bottom line, Christine, no matter what, these drugs are expensive. How much does insurance cover?
So right now, these are quite expensive. Some of these drugs are hundreds of dollars a week. Now, if you are prescribed for diabetes, then you might have insurance will cover this. And insurance does cover a lot of people on these drugs. But for weight loss specifically, some of these drugs are not covered by insurance. And one of the wrinkles here is that Medicare, way back like 20 years ago in the fen-phen craze, Congress made it that Medicare would not cover weight loss because there were so many, dramatic scams. So they need to go back and figure out, once Medicare starts to cover it for weight loss, then you'll probably see insurers start to follow. We're not there yet. We are in the early days of this, but this is a health story. It's also an economy story because when you can get healthcare costs in this country under control, it could be really life-changing and also financially important for the country.
Absolutely, when less people are obese and having complications in that way. Christine Romans, thank you so much.
Nice
Good to see you.
We're back now with details about a bitter legal battle between one of the most successful music duos of all time, Hall and Oates. Daryl Hall, the taller one with blonde hair, has filed a lawsuit and obtained a temporary restraining order against his longtime partner, John Oates. It's a business dispute that reportedly concerns their extensive music catalog. Fans of the iconic pop duo, news of a bitter legal dispute is hitting like a sour note. While neither party is commenting publicly on the suit, Hall was recently granted a temporary restraining order against his longtime music partner.
Hall appears to be trying to prevent John Oates from selling his shares in their collective joint venture, which appears to own at least some rights to their catalog of music.
Philly soul singers Daryl Hall and John Oates teamed up in the early 70s and became the #1 selling duo in music history, with hit singles like Man-Eater, Out of Touch, and I Can't Go For That. The two played Today Show Plaza back in 2003, and in 2014 were inducted together into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But without officially breaking up, the unique pop magic of Hall and Oates appears to have worn off. Hall even telling Bill Maher last year he didn't consider Oates a creative partner.
John and I are brothers, right? But we are not creative brothers. We are business partners. We did a lot of stuff. We made records called Hall and Oates together, but we've always been very separate.
According to court documents obtained by People but not seen by NBC News, the two singers formed a limited liability partnership, and Oates now wants to sell his share of it to a company called Primary Wave Music, which already owns some of their music catalog. According to People, Hall claims in the legal motion that the sale would be a breach of contract and would cause him imminent irreparable harm. NBC News reached out to attorneys for both parties and did not receive a response.
Musicians' catalogs are among the most precious thing they can own, because once they sell that off, they don't really have a lot else.
And now the Hall & Oates lawsuit does appear to be heading for arbitration. This is shining a light on the issue of song rights, which have increased in value with the growth of streaming music. That's making them lucrative investments. Some artists have actually cashed in on selling their music catalog rights, including Katy Perry, who recently did so for $225 million.
Ooh, okay.
All right, you can give a lot with that much money.
Really, yeah.
It is Giving Tuesday. Not everyone, though, has a generous spirit in their heart. The FBI says that consumers lost more than $10 billion to internet scams last year.
Yeah, some of those fraudulent schemes are carried out today under the guise of charity work.
Let's bring in Caleb Silver for more on this. He's the editor-in-chief at Investopedia. So let's start with what are some of the most typical scams we'd see on a day like today?
Yeah, sad, because this is the day people actually want to give, but you're going to maybe hear some familiar sounding charities that don't exactly match up with the name you recognize, but close enough that you're like, maybe that is that charity. So look for that. Request to wire money. If anybody's asking you to wire money, that is not a charity you want to be giving to. You want to do that through check, credit card, or a way to track it. Request to act immediately. This urgency. If you don't give now, this will happen. Don't fall for that, of course. Request for unorthodox payments. If somebody wants a gift card, if they want a prepaid credit card sent to them, that's probably not a charity. And then on the phone, you get a lot of these requests, not just in email and text, but on the phone, people calling you desperate to try to get you to give money on today's Giving Tuesday.
How much is this happening? How widespread is this issue? And also, who should really be aware that they may fall for it?
Well, anyone really that wants to give and feels generous today should be aware of it, but it's usually older folks that maybe not as digitally savvy. So if they get a text message saying, update your billing information, or now's the time to give, they may fall for that. Of course, they're more home frequently, so they may get that phone call and want to give on the phone. But anybody that's willing to give today, and usually who does it through digital means, could be vulnerable. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars a year in fraud.
So you told us kind of what to watch out for there. What are some tips you have in order to avoid being caught in one of these scams?
Yeah, give to the charities you're familiar with. If you regularly give on an annual basis to a charity, then you know it's the right charity. You know you're dealing with somebody legit. Donate directly through the website or mail a check in, again, so you can track your check if you're a check writer. And then you can use these sites like give.org, Charity Navigator, the Better Business Bureau to double check a charity to make sure it is legit and it is a nonprofit and you can get that tax write-off for it. And also, it's okay to use your credit card rewards to donate. It's an easy way to give. You have that money stored up for making purchases for the holiday season. Use those rewards. You can track your credit card giving much easier than you can giving on the phone or giving through a website.
How common is it that you can use those rewards for charities?
Many charities, including the First Aid, actually accept rewards points turned into cash from your credit cards. So you can look on your credit card in your statement and in your profile, and you can see which charities accept rewards. It's a great way to give, especially if you've racked up a lot of spending over the past couple of days.
Yeah,
and if you've successfully given in the past, I have a feeling you're going to be hearing today from some of those organizations that you've given to in the past.
They got your number.
Exactly. Right. Caleb Silver, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, there is more than a month left of this year, 2023. So that means it's time to start planning your 2024 vacations, right? Today is also Travel Tuesday. That means hundreds of flights to some of the top destinations in the world are going to be available at a deep discount.
From skiing in Aspen to partying in Ibiza, we have tips to get you wherever it is you want to go.
Joining us is Haley Berg, lead economist for the travel app Hopper. Haley, good morning. So in just a moment, you'll tell Joe how to get to Ibiza. But before we get into those details, just remind us why we should book today. I mean, how much do these discounts compare to what we see the rest of the year, or maybe what we might have just seen over the last few days of sales, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and airlines doing something on those days?
Travel Deal Tuesday is the #1 day of the whole year to get deals on not just flights, but also hotel stays. We see more deals available today than on Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. So if you haven't booked any travel for last-minute holiday trips or 2024, today is the day to do it. We're expecting to see incredible discounts. On the Hopper app, we'll have 35 to 50% off hotels in 80 top destinations. And airlines have already shared that they're participating today with special promotions. American Airlines, Aer Lingus, Fiji Airways. So there are a lot of folks participating and really great deals available.
So let's get to the tips. Where specifically should we be looking for the best deals? What are your tips on how to approach Travel Tuesday?
The good news is if you're looking for flight deals, you can find them everywhere on the airline's own website or on an online travel agency like Hopper. If you can be a little bit flexible about where you're flying to, that's how you'll get the best deal on flights. And when it comes to hotels, Hopper's offering exclusive deals up to 50% off, and you'll find those on the app all day today. You don't have to do anything special, just search for the trip that you're looking for and you'll see those discounts.
And now, of course, where should we be headed? What cities are you eyeing? What deals are available?
So we typically see really great deals on those international bucket list trips today. So keep in mind that if you've been thinking about one of those longer haul vacations, today is the day to check out the airline websites or the Hopper app for some of those bigger tickets. But also keep in mind domestic trips are going to be discounted. So we're seeing prices as low as $50 from New York to Miami, for example, plus discounts like 35% off a hotel stay in Miami. So keep in mind that whatever trips that you're taking in the next couple of months could be discounting, including holiday trips. If you haven't booked your Christmas flights, today is the day to do it. You could probably get some pretty good deals. Last year, we had customers save 80% off trips for Christmas.
Oh, wow. So the procrastinators might get rewarded today. We'll have to wait and see. All right. So, Haley, you keep mentioning flexibility. Explain to us the importance of booking a trip with flexible dates. What are some of the benefits there?
We often all book trips over the same weekends, over the same holidays. Think how everyone travels over 4th of July weekend or Memorial Day. The same goes for the holidays. The most popular travel dates for Christmas or just Thanksgiving this past weekend, they're very common and they're very expensive. So if you are thinking about booking maybe a last minute December holiday vacation or something for 2024, try to pick dates that are a little off the beaten track. Take Christmas, for example. If you fly home on the 28th instead of the 26th, you can save over 20% on your airfare. So flexibility on dates is a key way that you can lower the price of your ticket and access some of those extra special deals today.
Awesome. Haley Berg, good tips. Thank you so much and happy traveling. Welcome back. A winter wonderland has arrived at the White House. Yesterday, First Lady Jill Biden unveiled this year's holiday theme. It's called Magic, Wonder, and Joy, and it is inspired by children's experiences during the season. Dr. Biden said that each room is designed to capture pure, unfiltered delight and imagination. Throughout the White House, visitors will be able to see 98 Christmas trees, nearly 34,000 ornaments, 72 wreaths, and around 140,000 right? Did I say that right? 140,000 holiday lights. The White House expects thousands of people to visit during the holiday season. It also probably would align with my experience.
Right, it looks just like your place.
Very children,
exactly.
Yeah, with 140,000 lights as well.
All right, finally this hour, she is a singer who needs no introduction or last name for that matter. Yeah. Cher is going to be rocking around the Christmas tree at tomorrow night's Rockefeller Christmas tree lighting.
That's right. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith got to speak with her.
Right.
She loves you.
So there are stars, right? There are mega stars, and then there's Cher.
Cher, you could call her an icon, but face it. Icon isn't adequate. Her range.
Wait a minute!
Her looks. Her talent. Her longevity. Like, what hasn't she done? A Christmas record.
I bought your record, cash money. I made the investment.
Okay, tell me it wasn't worth it.
It was worth every penny. The thing that occurred to me immediately was, why hadn't you done this before?
Because I didn't want to.
Really?
Yep. I didn't want to because I couldn't find myself in Christmas records. I didn't really want to sing any of those songs. And then my record company was really good. They just let me go to my house and then hand them the master.
So here comes Cher. Christmas, a half dozen brand new songs. And a half dozen classics.
I have never had anybody on any album.
Ever?
Ever.
Wow.
Duets with legends like Cyndi Lauper, Michael Bublé, and Stevie Wonder, whose What Christmas Means to Me evokes the joys of Christmases past.
So I called him and I was really nervous. I said, Stevie, I did this song and I can do part of it really well, but there's some part I just can't do and I need you to come and do it. And he said, consider it done. And then I ran around my room. I swear to God, I ran around my room. I jumped up and down in my bed screaming, Stevie Wonder's going to be on my album.
And so too, Darlene Love, now a duet. Cher first sang backup for her in 1963. We found a photo.
Oh, I know. Oh, I'd love to have that. Yeah, I was 17. I can feel something inside me say.
Along with the Christmas album comes the 25th anniversary edition of Believe.
How amazing is it that Believe is 25 years old?
It's not that amazing, okay? Pisses me. It pisses the out of me, and you can't put that out.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. No, it just is like, what is this?
So you and Age, you're not friends?
No, my mother didn't mind, but I do. I hate it.
I had a tough time with 70. I will admit it. Really knocked me in a hole for a while.
I'd give anything to be 70 again.
Cher gives off some crazy great energy. Interviewing her is a blast.
Are you writing a memoir?
Yes. It's very difficult because I've lived too long and I've done too many things. And so it would have to be like an encyclopedia, truthfully.
A tome divided into the multiple Cher eras, including movie star.
So during the pandemic, and we all sat around watching movies, and I went back and watched Moonstruck. You just knocked the daylights out of that part. It was just so great.
I know.
The Oscar and Grammy Award winner, known for those unforgettable performances. But even so, the big one tomorrow night?
Being in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting, is that a thrill of a lifetime for you?
Yes, it's a little bit scary.
I don't think you're afraid of much.
You'd be surprised.
Thanks to the Pebble Bar right next door, gave us the space to do the interview, and we're talking about Moonstruck. And she says, I said, with that scene where you go to the opera and you cry, she says, there was no music, there was no opera. It was just the director saying, this is what's happening in this music as it's happening. And you see this tear come down her eye. She won the Academy Award for it.
Of course, yeah.
And good for her. She knows she was good. She knows she was good and she owns it.
She's such a pleasure.
I like how she wants to be your age. She wants to...
I do anything to be 70 again. Right?
That's so great.
She's a cool customer.
She really
Oh my
is.
gosh, what an interview.
Love
Harry.
that interview. She's an icon. You're an icon, Harry. Thank you so much for joining us.
And she'll be on.
Yes, exactly. Tomorrow you can catch NBC's Christmas at Rockefeller Center, 8 p.m. Eastern.
There you go.
They
We got
light
a little
the tree. They sing some songs.
Taste of the parade.
Kelly Clarkson is going to be. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw Cher from a distance at the parade, but I could see her. She was hugging her dance. I mean, she goes out there and she's hugging the people with her.
She's
and all
the
that.
real, genuine article.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's so awesome.
All right.
Takes nothing
Harry,
for granted.
thank you. So good to see you. Merry
Appreciate it.
Christmas.
Thank you.
Gonna do it for this hour. Morning news now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.